Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Gary Pierre.
And I'm Viano Ravinka. The attempted car bomb detonation in Times Square last week has once again brought home the reality that a terrorist attack on New York City is possible, if not highly probable. What's more concerning to national security officials is the connection between the bomber and the Taliban in Pakistan. Although there were some initial doubts that the Taliban had the ability to stage such an attack, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder has confirmed the group funded and trained the accused bomber Faisal Shahzad.
On this episode of Independent Sources, what's being reported on the ground in Pakistan? Also, what effect will this botched bombing of New York City have on U.S.-Pakistan relations?
We take a look at what's happening in Greece. Are the dramatic scenes from the streets of Athens really a reflection of the mood in that country? And will a multi-billion-dollar bailout be enough to help their economy?
Then, News India Times under new management.
We'll have those stories and news of the week after this.
If you attack your country, you should definitely lose the right and the privilege to be here.
I definitely was upset to hear of this news. I'm shocked at the fact that he, has been naturalized. He's now a citizen, and that he was over in Pakistan for so long training, supposedly.
I think they should put him in jail and strip his citizenship, of course.
I don't know that taking his citizenship is the thing that I think should be done to him. I probably think he should be persecuted under every law, letter of the law.
News that the Taliban supported Faisal Shahzad's attempted attack in Times Square has many in the Obama administration calling on Pakistan to step up its effort to combat terrorists in that country. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton took a shot at the Pakistani government over the weekend, all but accusing them of harboring Osama bin Laden. So what's being said on the ground about Mrs. Clinton's comments, and does this salvo signal a change in Pakistan-U.S. relations? Joining me in studio to discuss these and other issues are author of the book A Country Called America, Alia Malek, and the publisher of the Pakistan News, Mujib Lodi. Welcome.
Hi.
Mujib, let's start with you. Pakistan finds itself in a very untenable situation. On the one hand, the U.S. is accusing it of not doing enough to combat terrorists. On the other hand, cracking down on terrorists in Pakistan hasn't had much success. Where does Pakistan go from there?
Gary, thank you very much for inviting us. But this is a very crucial time for all Pakistani, especially in American Pakistani and in the Pakistani government, because last 15, 16 years, Pakistani government doing whatever they can do for American government, whatever they suggest, whatever they said, do more. But the thing is, it's not the this individual Faisal Shahzad should not be effect on the government level or the Pakistani Americans people. This is individual. But again, there's a link going on in Pakistani Taliban. Should not be count on that. But if there is some reality, definitely Pakistani government will be in pressure. And they're already doing especially last 2 years since the new governments came on Swat Valley. Governments of Pakistan and army was in all three forces they are using on that area, and they are losing a lot of army. Army Jawan, you can say that soldier, and they're doing their best. But this is especially something new. If you go back for the last couple of years, 9/11 was not only for Pakistanis, for all Muslims. They've been targeting. But this is individually Pakistani, and definitely Pakistani government will be in the pressure. But in my sources, government of Pakistan giving all kind of link and facilities and cooperation with American government.
Alia, this is a situation that a lot of Arab states have found themselves facing as well. Saudi Arabia, for instance, Egypt, and some others. Now, how have these countries been able to juggle this push and pull?
I don't know that they juggle it as much as they completely suppress it. I mean, there are no spaces in which there's room for meaningful dissent in many of these countries that are dictatorships for the most part that are supported by the United States government. So there isn't that much of a push and pull. If anything, the way that there's been a bit of a release valve is that the Saudis sort of allow the religious conservatives in the country to sort of control the sort of the social sector of the country in terms of, the ideas of enforcing women's dress and women not driving and these sorts of things as a sort of a way to maintain the legitimacy of their monarchy. But what happens, I think what you see happens is you see people then, particularly these sorts of religious fundamentalists, who then when they go to the West and they find themselves a little bit of space, freedom to operate in, they aren't really well trained in dissent. So the only way that, and this is part of, I think, the reasons that you see the sorts of fundamentalism expressing itself in the way that we are seeing it express itself.
What's happening in Pakistan? Is there really a movement to attract and to recruit Americans who are under the radar and have them come here and wreak havoc on America?
Gary, let me give you a little bit my own point of view, what I have, my own investigation. In Pakistan, there is not only one, there is thousands of different individual group is working. They hate Americans. Because of drone attacks in that area, those attacks are successful for American government, their targets, but it's killing a lot of innocent people. These teenagers, they have so many groups, and they are working underground. I'm giving you one example. There's 5 American Pakistani teenagers. They went from America to Pakistan and joining Taliban for this war, and they got arrested because of Pakistani government was working so hard for that and with American cooperation. But these are thousands and thousands of groups. They are teenagers especially, and some fanatic mullahs. Those been working since Afghanistan, and when the Russia attack in Afghanistan. After the war, they were nowhere, and they came back. When they came back to Pakistan, they are working their own network. So it's very difficult to find and target them. It should be very, very secret way and very close relation between American government and Pakistan government to catch those underground teenager groups, those individually working, because internet, it's everywhere.
Aliyah, do you think there will be a local backlash to this incident?
Well, I think in the United States we sort of have this well-established pattern of locating local scapegoats for these sorts of geopolitical problems. We saw it happen, obviously, and most dramatically during World War II with the internment of the Japanese Americans. And after 9/11, we saw sort of the peak of that sort of the cycle when something would flare up geopolitically. You would see Arab or Muslim Americans here in the United States sort of asked to be held accountable for what was going on overseas. Now, after 9/11, one of the sort of fortunate consequences has been that Arab and Muslim Americans have been willing to sort of step forward and participate in the creation of the knowledge about them here in this country, and I think a lot of gains have been made. So it would be impossible, I would say, right now to see the same thing kind of that we saw happen right after 9/11 happen again.
That's when they were physically attacking.
Sikhs actually who are neither Arab nor Muslim were murdered, and I think about 10 people died right after 9/11. You saw lots of examples of backlash discrimination, and I think we're going to see it again here, both from government actors, and I'm sure the FBI has already contacted most of the mosques or most of these Pakistani American community centers, but also at the same time within the media. I mean, the rhetoric that we've heard coming out of people like Bill Maher has, screaming and making a lot of noise about this being congenital to Islam is not really moving the conversation particularly forward. But that said, that's sort of part of the American growing experience, and I think it's sort of incumbent on all of us to just be vigilant as the dialogue and the discourse develops.
Mujib, what about the Pakistani American community? Is there fear? Are they bracing themselves for some kind of backlash, or where do you stand?
Gary, since last 1 week, there's two main places in New York, Jackson Heights and Brooklyn. There's mostly Pakistani live, and there is every next day they have meetings because they want to do something because they live in this country. They want to save their next generation and right now. So there's a lot of activities and worry about what the Faisal Shahzad did, and because they are afraid that in the near future maybe another Faisal Shahzad maybe come out, because of there's a lot of lacking between teenager and their parents and their teachers and the governments. There's a lot of suggestion that we should, American governments on different levels, they should be put their close eyes, raise the activities, especially those religious teenager are gathering, because not all are bad. I know a lot of people, Pakistani American, they love America, but the some are, they have kind of link with the fanatic, with the extremist groups. We don't know, but we have to find out. We have to watch them. We have to watch closely. That's the only way we can save this country.
Unfortunately, we had to leave it at that. But this is a fascinating discussion, one that we'll have for years to come on this show. Aliyah Malik, thank you for being with us.
Thank
you. Mujib Lubi, thanks for being here. Now here's Marlene Peralta with some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. Jewish press reports former United Nations Ambassador John Bolton thinks that President Obama could harm Israel's security by agreeing to speak with Egypt about a nuclear-free Middle East. Bolton made his comments during an interview with an Israeli radio station. He said President Obama's actions were absurd and aggravating. The Weekly Gleaner reports that Air Jamaica will no longer be the island's national carrier. As of this month, Caribbean Airlines is now owned by Trinidad and Tobago. The change happened after the Jamaican government could no longer afford to finance the carrier. The airline had reported losses in 40 of its 44 years since it began operating. The Amsterdam News dedicated its front page to the two street vendors who alerted authorities to the bomb at Times Square last week. The paper is calling Dwayne Jackson and Lance Orton heroes. The article explains that although the two men had been mentioned by the mainstream press, Mayor Bloomberg and New York City Police Department were the focus of their reporting. From the Diario de Mexico, day laborers are complaining that it is getting harder for them to get jobs. Many of these workers told the paper that they are sometimes fined for selling merchandise in the streets. The workers also claim that they are harassed by many residents of the areas where they solicit work. Activists say the constant harassment from the neighbors and the authorities are forcing these workers to go home with empty pockets. And finally, from the Italian Tribune, a Connecticut mayor put aside her office duties to donate a kidney to one of her constituents. Mayor April Capone learned about Carlos Sanchez's condition through Facebook. Sanchez's status post said that all his family and friends had been tested, but none of them were a match. Capone said she didn't hesitate to offer her kidney. She was positive that she would be the match Sanchez was desperately looking for. Those are just a few headlines from the ethnic media. Vianora, back to you.
Thanks, Marlene. All the drama with the Greek economy turned tragic last week when 3 people were killed during street riots in Athens. The images of protesters hurling rocks and attacking police in full riot gear stunned many who did not expect citizens' anger over new austerity measures to reach such a fever pitch. Now, a new act in this economic drama is about to begin. European leaders recently announced a $957 million rescue package to combat the debt crisis facing Greece and other European economies. Joining me to discuss this bailout of the Greek economy and the recent unrest in that country are business reporter Dodi Tsiantar and Dimitris Robotis of Neo Magazine. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start by watching this clip from the Deputy Greek Foreign Minister Dimitris Droutsas. Take a look.
We are committed to our objective and to our goal, the goal of the Greek people, to build a new Greece, the Greece of tomorrow, and to contribute to a strong and prosperous Europe. And we will succeed. The images that the world saw yesterday from Athens are not the real Greece.
Dimitris, are the images that we see not the real Greece?
Well, of course not. But going back to what he said about the new Greece, I thought the new Greece would be the one after the Olympics. So this is probably the new Greece. somehow. But of course, those images are, you know, as I said, exaggerated.
Before the Olympics, Greece recorded sustained economic growth and used to be a model country for membership
No,
in
what
the
I'm
EU.
saying is that this slogan about the new Greece, it's overplayed. So I don't know why they keep, you know, pounding on that. I mean, that's okay. Greece is one and the same, and there are many things to be done. And instead of looking to make something new, they should actually do the right thing right now and pick up what the others left there and try to make something out of it.
What do you think about the images that we see in the mainstream media with the street riots?
Well, about 2 years ago, when they had some other big demonstrations in Athens right before Christmas, when a student was killed, I don't know if you remember that. Looking on TV, I thought that the whole city of Athens, which is huge by the way, was burning, and that life there stopped until I went there. And what was happening is that a very small section of the city was closed, and it was closed by the police, by the way, not by the demonstrators. Shops were still opening, people were doing business, life was going on. So yes, this is an exaggeration. I mean, we should not take these images literally, but again, it's the power of television, and I'm sure not many people will share this view. But it's the same thing when you see images from other countries, including the US. You think that it's a huge disaster or something, but it's a much more manageable and smaller, I would say, incident.
Dodi, the New York Times said that Greeks have low tolerance for change and high tolerance for protests. How common are protests in Greece, and how
They're
is
very
this?
common. I mean, Dimitri's right in that what you see on TV is not the real Greece. And the foreign minister was correct as well. They're common, it happens frequently, the streets get clogged up. What happened last week was not that common when it gets that violent and that you end up with fatalities. That was extreme, and to me that marked a new escalation in the problems that are going on in the country. I was a little disturbed today when I saw some poll results of at least 2 newspapers on Sunday that had something between 50 and 70% of the Greek public supported more protests. In other words, the austerity measures that have kicked in are so severe that it's spreading. I mean, the same polls back in January were saying 75% of the public was in favor of austerity measures to help turn the country around, to produce a new Greece and get rid of the atmosphere that has been there for so many years. I don't know where it's going. It concerns me.
Dimitris, what does this...
By the way, there was another poll 2 days ago, I believe, and 70% of those asked were against strikes.
Oh, really? So it depends who they're asking.
Right. Yeah. Again, it's everything is very relative.
Demetrios, you talked about Greece having a shadow economy. What did you mean by that, and what does that type of economy mean for this situation?
Right. Well, I'm not an economist, but I lived there, and I know people who live there. So the shadow economy is like Greece's major problem, but in this case might be the factor that will save the people.
What's a shadow economy?
For example, let's say that you are a teacher and you get paid by the state and you pay taxes on the money paid by the state. At the same time, you might have another job, let's say, in your home. You might sell something, or you might give private lessons to students for which you pay no taxes, nobody knows about it. Now, when you go, let's say, especially high school teachers, by the way, tend to do that a lot. And we're talking about billions of euros. So some people actually say...
It's estimated to be 30 billion euros, the shadow economy.
Some people even say that it might be...
Even more?
Actually, say as big as the real economy.
I haven't heard that. The studies have put it at around 30 billion.
Right.
And the people who studied it.
So that, in a sense, might help people to survive these measures.
It wouldn't help the government had it collected the taxes. It wouldn't help.
It would have helped a lot. And then the government,
Right.
to be fair to the government, has been trying to institute a change in the way that people directly hitting the issues of tax evasion and the shadow economy by making it obligatory since the beginning of the year to ask for, you have to ask for a receipt every time there's a transaction. In the past, you'd call a plumber to your house. The plumber would take care of your toilet. He'd charge you 100 euros. You'd pay him cash, and he'd walk away. No receipt given, no nothing. That money went in the plumber's pocket, never declared.
Right.
Now, you have to ask for the receipt. So that suddenly, slowly, hopefully, that's the goal anyway, will change the mentality where they'll be reluctant to hide the income if they've been asked.
And Dori, what's this latest package, the almost $1 trillion package,
rescue package
will mean to Greece?
Well, it's not all going to Greece. The most recent wave of money that was passed yesterday from the IMF and the EU is almost like a protection, almost like a super fund created by them to help other countries that are going to be facing the same issues. Greece got a package of 110, but I could be wrong. I never remember the numbers. 120 billion euros.
10 billion doesn't.
Partially from the EU, from its partner countries in the Eurozone, and a smaller percentage of it from the IMF. So this last batch, I think, will not influence Greece that much, but it might help the problem that's going on in Greece and with the markets doubting that Greece might not make good on its debt, will help countries like Portugal and Spain and Italy, who are the next in line, basically, that might have a debt crisis problem.
And Dimitrios, how is the diaspora reacting to the crisis in Greece? Are they sending more money back home? Can it help more the country's GDP?
Well, in the beginning, there was talk about issuing a bond for the diaspora Greeks. Actually, it was a proposal made by some people here. Then, when the Prime Minister visited,
idea.
Yeah, well, it didn't go ahead. No good ideas go ahead in this situation. But then, when the Prime Minister was here in February, he met a group of very important Greek American entrepreneurs, and he talked with them, and they exchanged information and ideas. But nothing happened after that, as far as I know. But I think it will come to regular people. I mean, if you know that your mother doesn't make ends meet in Greece, you will send her something. Same thing with sisters, brothers, nephews. But again, we have to make clear that Greece is not like Argentina. Why? Because you have the highest percentage of home ownership in the world. You have also extended families that are helpful to each other. So I'm not afraid that workers, in quote, or poor people, poor Greek people will not have enough to eat or pay the rent or the heat and everything else. It's not going to be like that, no way. Certain people will suffer, but they are suffering anyway.
And on that note, we'll have to wrap it here. Dodi Tiantar and Dimitris Robotis, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
I know that there are terrorists, and I know that there will probably be other attacks around the world, and you never know, but you just can't be afraid all the time, afraid to venture out, so I still feel comfortable coming to New York.
I can't live every day being scared, but I am very concerned. I work back and forth in this area, so it kind of leaves me always in the Times Square area.
There wasn't one part of me that felt I didn't feel safe to come to New York City in Times Square, even though on Saturday there was the scare.
We believe in NYPD. We expect them to know what they're doing.
Finally, from us tonight, News India Times has built a foundation over 3 decades reporting on news from the subcontinent. Recently, the newspaper came under new ownership, and the publisher is looking to cover more news about local issues and how they affect Indian Americans. The new team is also revamping its web strategy to be the main voice for Indians living outside the country. Gary filed this report.
News India Times has been a mainstay in the affluent Indian American community for decades. So when its founder and main backer, Gopal Raju, died last year, the newspaper and its sister publication, Daisy Talk, were quickly snapped up by a prominent New Jersey physician. The new owner, Dr. Sudhir Parikh, was no novice to the publishing world. He owns the Indian American, a glossy 60-page magazine.
When I turned 60, I decided that I should do something which really meaningfully serve the community, leave the legacy, and I can enjoy it. And media is always my passion and hobby, and I always believe that media can really mold the opinion of the second generation.
Dr. Sudhir Parikh has been active for the past 35 years in the Indian community, supporting charitable organizations, community groups, and political actions. But he wants to have even more impact.
My plan is, if it works out well, 10, 15 years down the road, make this whole thing as a community-owned project.
As he seeks to influence opinion, Dr. Parikh has grand plans for News India Times and its sister publications. He wants to expand the circulation and reach the majority of the roughly 26 million Indians living outside of the country.
We would like to take it to the web and make it more global. And so even our counterpart in India can read it and enjoy it.
To meet the challenge, Dr. Parikh brought in Sunil Adam, editor of the Indian American, as editor of News India Times.
We are trying to make it even better than what it was before, in the sense make it much more reader-friendly in terms of look and feel, and also widen the coverage of the Indian American community. In the sense, so far most Indian newspapers focus primarily on news coming from India and news related to US-India relations and the kind. But our focus now slightly changed to address more of the community's concerns here.
So far, Adam said the reaction from readers has been encouraging. They say they enjoy the new design, but he cautions that it will take time until everyone is comfortable with it.
Never shock the reader. So most of the changes of focus and content takes place incrementally. In the sense, keep what you're doing, but keep adding. Value additions are better than metamorphosis. The Indian American is a feature magazine. We tend to discuss issues related to the trends in the Indian American community. For instance, how assimilation of the community takes place in the United States, and yet how the community retains its own identity. So there are a lot of contradictions in the process.
Despite facing issues of existentialism, Adam sees a bright future for the publication and the growing Indian community.
The Indian American community now is making big strides in just about every conceivable field, and the numbers are increasing. So the community as such is coming of age. So we have to keep pace with that growth in all respects. And since the community is very dispersed, it will also mean our expansion has to be greater to reach for them, both in terms of coverage as well as reaching them in terms of marketing terms.
For Independent Sources, I'm Gary Pierre.
That's our show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
In the meantime, be independent-minded.